6 years ago, Natalie Brooks fell 300 feet into a raging river. Her husband watched her disappear into the darkness. She was 6 months pregnant. Her body was never found. But what if the dead could come back? What if they could plan, watch, wait, and when the time was right, destroy everything you built on their grave? This is the story of a woman who died, and the ghost who came back for revenge. Over the next 3 months, Natalie, now calling herself Dr. Sophia Morgan, wove herself into every corner of Ethan's life. She attended campaign events, sat in on strategy meetings, and slowly became indispensable.
Absolutely looking
She
forward
was
to it.
brilliant at her job, too brilliant. She knew exactly what buttons to push because she'd once known Ethan better than anyone. But it was the small things that began to crack his composure. At a fundraiser, she wore the same perfume Natalie used to wear. She'd found the bottle in an old shop, White Tea and Fig, discontinued years ago. When she passed Ethan in the hallway, he stopped mid-conversation, his face going pale. "Are you all right, Councilman?" she'd asked, concern dripping from her voice. "That perfume. What is it?" "Oh, this? It's vintage. A friend gave it to me." "Why?" "Nothing. It just reminds me of someone." She smiled and walked away, leaving him standing there, visibly shaken. His hands trembled. His breath came short. And somewhere deep inside, a door he'd locked 6 years ago began to crack open. Another time, during a tense strategy meeting, she'd unconsciously quoted something Natalie used to say: "The most important thing in life is family, building something that lasts beyond just money or success." Ethan's coffee cup clattered against the table, the dark liquid spilling across his notes. "Where did you hear that?" "Hear what?" "That phrase. Those exact words." Natalie tilted her head, her expression carefully neutral, genuinely confused. "I don't know. It's just something I believe." "Why?" "My late wife used to say that." Word for word. The room went silent. Everyone stopped breathing. Natalie touched his hand gently, professionally, her fingers barely grazing his skin. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. Sometimes wisdom just echoes through different people, I suppose." But Ethan pulled his hand away like she'd burned him, his eyes dark with something Natalie couldn't quite read. Suspicion? Fear? Guilt? All three, perhaps, twisted together into something that looked almost like recognition. But Sophia wasn't just haunting Ethan. She'd found something else. Something that would change everything. Something that would make her revenge even more personal than anyone could imagine. Isabella was the first to sense real danger. She'd been watching Sophia from the beginning. Any woman getting close to Ethan triggered her jealousy. But this was different. Sophia wasn't flirting. She wasn't trying to seduce him. She was doing something worse, something more insidious. She was haunting him. "There's something wrong with that woman," Isabella told Ethan one night in their bedroom. The same bedroom that had once been Natalie's. The same sheets where another woman had once slept. "Dr. Morgan is helping us win this election. She's making you paranoid. I've seen you, Ethan. You barely sleep anymore. You jump every time she enters a room. You watch her when you think no one's looking. And last night, you said her name in your sleep." "I said Sophia's name?" "No." Isabella's voice was cold, sharp as a blade. "You said Natalie's." Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands, fingers digging into his scalp. "It's just stress. The campaign, the pressure, It's been 6 years. Why are you suddenly thinking about her now?" "Because that woman, Sophia, there's something about her. The way she looks at me sometimes, like she can see straight through my skull into my thoughts. Like she knows something. And the things she says, the things she does. It's like Natalie is." He stopped himself, afraid to finish the sentence. "Like Natalie is what? Back from the dead?" Isabella laughed, but there was no humor in it, only fear disguised as mockery. "She drowned, Ethan. We made sure of it. You didn't see the body. They never found the body. The water carried her away. She fell 300 feet into a raging river in the dark. No one survives that." But even as Isabella said it, even as she tried to convince herself with her own words, a cold dread settled in her stomach like a stone. Because deep down in the place where nightmares lived, she'd always wondered, While Ethan's world was unraveling, Sophia was building something else. A connection so powerful, it would become the most dangerous weapon in her arsenal. And involved a 6-year-old boy who had no idea that the woman mentoring him held the key to his entire identity. While dismantling Ethan's world piece by piece, Natalie was building a relationship with her son. She'd requested to be Lucas's primary mentor at the foundation. Patricia had been thrilled. The boy desperately needed consistent support, someone who could break through the walls he'd built around his heart. Lucas doesn't talk much about what he's feeling. Patricia had explained,
sweetie.
her voice
Promise?
filled with concern.
I promise.
The loss of his adoptive parents really closed him off. But he seems comfortable with you. I've never seen him open up to anyone the way he does with you. Comfortable was an understatement. Lucas gravitated toward Natalie like a flower to the sun, like he'd been searching for her his entire short life. During their sessions, he'd sit close to her, sometimes resting his head against her shoulder while she read to him. His small body relaxed in a way it never was with anyone else. "Why do you smell nice?" he'd asked one day, his voice completely innocent, childlike curiosity without any agenda. Natalie's throat had tightened painfully. "Do-e. Yeah, like home. But I don't remember what home smells like." She'd had to excuse herself to cry in the bathroom, her hands gripping the sink, her reflection blurred through tears. One Tuesday afternoon, Lucas was drawing while Natalie worked nearby. He'd been quiet for a long time, his small hand moving the crayon carefully across the paper, creating worlds only he could see. "Ms. Sophia? Yes, sweetheart? Do you think my real mom loved me?" Natalie's pen stopped moving. Time seemed to freeze. She looked at the little boy, her little boy, his eyes so serious, so full of unanswered questions, so full of pain no child should carry. "Why would you ask that?" "Because she left me. The Pattersons said my real mom left me somewhere and someone found me. If she loved me, why would she leave me?" Natalie knelt beside him, her professional composure cracking, taking his small hands in hers. "Lucas, sometimes things happen that are so complicated, so painful, that we can't understand them when we're young. But I promise you something." Her voice cracked, emotion bleeding through. "Your real mother loved you more than anything in this world. Sometimes loving someone means making impossible choices to keep them safe." "How do you know?" "Because every mother loves her child. It's the strongest love in the universe. Nothing can break it. Not distance, not time, not even—" She stopped, tears threatening to spill over. "Not even death." Lucas studied her face for a long moment, his 6-year-old eyes seeing more than they should. Then, with the wisdom that children sometimes possess, he said, "You're sad, Ms. Sophia." "Why are you sad?" "Because I understand your mom," Natalie whispered, her voice barely audible. "More than you know." Lucas carefully set down his crayon and hugged her. A 6-year-old's fierce, trusting hug that held nothing back. And Natalie held him, her baby, her son, her reason for surviving, and silently promised him that everything would soon make sense. But Natalie's carefully constructed plan was about to accelerate. At the campaign's biggest fundraiser, she would plant seeds that couldn't be undone. Seeds that would grow into a forest of suspicion, doubt, and fear. And 1 week later, she would do something that would push Ethan past the breaking point. Something that would force him to face the truth he'd buried 6 years ago. The campaign's biggest fundraiser was scheduled for a Friday night at the Atlanta History Center. 500 guests, major donors, press coverage. Ethan's chance to cement his lead before the election, to prove he was untouchable. Natalie had helped plan every detail, every moment, every interaction. "I want you there," Ethan had told her during their prep meeting, his voice carrying an edge of dependence he probably didn't realize was there. "Isabella will be beside me officially, but I need you working the room, reading people, telling me who's genuine and who's playing games." Of course, Councilman. Natalie had smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm very good at spotting liars." Something in her tone made Ethan pause, made his instinct scream, but he'd let it go. The night of the event, Natalie wore a stunning emerald dress that hugged her figure perfectly, that turned heads, that commanded attention. Her hair was down in soft waves, and she looked beautiful. Devastatingly so, dangerously so. When she entered the ballroom, heads turned, including Ethan's. He'd been mid-conversation with the donor, but his eyes tracked her across the room like a predator watching prey, or perhaps prey watching a predator. Isabella noticed and squeezed his arm hard enough to hurt, hard enough to leave marks. "Remember who you came with," she hissed through her perfect smile. Throughout the evening, Natalie worked the room brilliantly, charming donors and journalists alike with practiced ease. But she was also planting seeds, careful, calculated seeds that would bloom into poison flowers. To Ethan's campaign manager, "You know, it's remarkable how much Councilman Brooks has accomplished since his wife's death. Almost like he was freed by it." To a journalist, "The late Mrs. Brooks was 6 months pregnant when she died, correct? How tragic that the baby's death was never properly investigated." To a major donor who knew Ethan personally, "Have you noticed how the councilman never mentions his late wife's family? I wonder if they know how quickly he moved on with Isabella." Each seed was small, subtle enough not to raise immediate alarm, planted with surgical precision. But together, they would grow into a garden of doubt. At 9 o'clock, Natalie approached Ethan and Isabella as they stood near the center of the ballroom, playing their parts as the perfect political couple. "Councilman, Mrs. Brooks, wonderful event. I just wanted to mention, I'm working on a surprise for next week's rally. Something personal that will really connect you with voters on a deeper level." "What kind of surprise?" Isabella asked, her eyes narrowed, her instincts screaming. "If I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise." Natalie smiled innocently, sweetly, like poison honey. "But trust me, it will be unforgettable. It's about honoring the past while embracing the future." She walked away, leaving them both unsettled, leaving them both afraid. "I don't like her," Isabella said flatly. "You don't like any woman who isn't you. This is different, Ethan. There's something wrong. Something dangerous. Fire her." "I can't fire her. She's too valuable, and we're too close to the election. The donors love her." "Then I'll do it." "Isabella, stop being paranoid." But Isabella wasn't being paranoid. Her instincts, honed by years of manipulation and calculation, were screaming that Sophia Morgan was dangerous. She just didn't know why yet. She just didn't know that the danger was already inside their walls, already wrapped around their throats. The following Wednesday, Sophia requested a private meeting. Just her and Ethan, alone in his office after hours. What she would say in that room would shatter everything. And what Ethan would discover would make him question his own sanity. The following Wednesday, Natalie requested a private meeting with Ethan to discuss some sensitive psychological insights she told his assistant with clinical professionalism. They met in his office after hours. Just the two of them. The building was empty. The silence was oppressive. "Thank you for seeing me," Natalie said, settling into the chair across from his desk with practiced calm. "Of course. What's this about? I've been working with you for 3 months now, and I've observed some concerning patterns. Patterns that worry me as a mental health professional." Ethan leaned back in his chair, trying to appear relaxed, failing. "Concerning how?" "You have nightmares. You startle easily at unexpected sounds. You avoid certain topics, specifically anything related to your late wife's death. These are classic symptoms of PTSD and unresolved guilt." "Grief isn't guilt, Dr. Morgan." "No, but guilt often masquerades as grief." Natalie crossed her legs, maintaining professional composure, her voice measured and clinical. "Tell me about the night your wife died." "It was an accident. She fell." "Did she? Or did something else happen?" The air in the room went cold. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Ethan's eyes hardened. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that you're carrying a weight that goes beyond normal grief. I'm suggesting that perhaps there are details about that night that weren't shared with investigators. I'm suggesting," she leaned forward, her eyes locked on his, "that you might benefit from telling the truth. For your own psychological well-being, of course." Ethan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This meeting is over. Councilman." "I said this meeting is over." His voice was dangerous now, threatening, barely controlled. "And Dr. Morgan?" I think your services are no longer required. You're fired. You can fire me from your campaign, Natalie said, standing slowly, gracefully, taking her time. But you can't fire me from your conscience. The truth has a way of surfacing, doesn't it? Like a body in water. Eventually, it always rises to the top. Ethan's face went white, bloodless, like he'd seen a ghost. Get out. Natalie gathered her things and walked to the door. But before she left, before she disappeared into the night, she turned back. 6 years ago, you pushed your pregnant wife off a cliff. You watched her fall into the darkness. You called 911 and played the grieving husband perfectly. You collected life insurance money and married your mistress. You built an empire on murder. You're insane. Am I? Natalie's voice was calm, almost gentle, like a therapist speaking to a patient. Or am I the only person in this room who's actually sane? Good night, Councilman Brooks. Sleep well, if you can. She left him standing there, trembling with rage and fear, trembling with the terrible possibility that his past had finally caught up to him. Natalie had just revealed her hand. But she wasn't done, not even close. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan's perfect life would crumble like sandstone. Anonymous tips, reopened. Investigations, donors pulling out, campaign staff whispering. And Isabella? Isabella was about to do something desperate. Something that would prove Natalie right about everything. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan's world began to crumble. An anonymous tip led investigators to reopen the case into Natalie Brooks's death. New questions were raised about the timing, about Ethan's financial situation before and after her death, about his suspiciously quick relationship with Isabella. Campaign donors began pulling out, uncomfortable with the renewed scrutiny, unwilling to attach their names to potential scandal. Journalists who'd been charmed by Dr. Morgan started asking harder questions about the accident, digging deeper, finding inconsistencies. And Isabella, feeling the pressure mounting, feeling the walls closing in, began to crack. This is that woman's doing. She raged one night, pacing their bedroom like a caged animal. Sophia. She did this. We need to find her. We need to silence her. Silence her how? Ethan's voice was dead, hollow, emotionless. However, we need to. We tried that once before, Isabella. Look where it got us. Natalie Brooks is dead. Is she? Ethan looked at his wife with haunted eyes, with eyes that had seen too much, that carried too much weight. What if she isn't? What if she survived and has been planning this for 6 years? What if she's been watching us, studying us, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy us? That's impossible. Is it? Think about it. Sophia shows up out of nowhere with perfect credentials. She looks nothing like Natalie, but there's something about her. The way she moves, the things she says, the way she looks at me. What if? Stop it. Isabella's voice was shrill, panicked, desperate. You're being ridiculous. We watched her fall. We watched the search teams fail to find her body. She's dead, Ethan. Dead. But even as she said it, even as she tried to convince herself with the force of her own voice, doubt crept into her mind like smoke under a door. Because deep down, in the place where guilt lived and nightmares bred, Isabella had always wondered, always feared, always known that the river might not have been enough. The rally. Saturday afternoon. Piedmont Park. 500 people. Press cameras everywhere. Live coverage. Ethan would stand on that stage and try to save his campaign, try to reclaim his narrative, try to prove he was innocent. But he had no idea that standing in the crowd, watching, waiting, invisible, was a ghost. And this ghost was about to reveal herself in the most devastating way possible. The moment of truth was here. The rally was scheduled for Saturday afternoon in Piedmont Park. Despite the scandal, despite the whispers, despite the donors fleeing, Ethan's team had decided to push forward, show strength, answer questions directly, reclaim the narrative. Natalie wasn't invited, but she came anyway. She stood at the edge of the crowd, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, anonymous among hundreds, watching as Ethan took the stage. Isabella stood beside him, perfectly coiffed, her smile strained, her hand gripping his arm like a lifeline. "Thank you all for coming," Ethan began, his voice amplified through speakers, carrying across the park. "I know there have been questions raised recently about my past, about the tragic loss of my first wife. I want to address those questions directly, honestly, because I have nothing to hide." Natalie felt her heart pounding. This was it. This was the moment she'd planned for 6 years. Every breath, every step, every choice had led to this. 6 years ago, my wife Natalie and I went on what should have been a beautiful weekend getaway. Instead, I watched the woman I loved fall to her death. It was the worst moment of my life, and not a day goes by that I don't. Liar. The word cut through the park like a gunshot, like thunder, like judgment itself. Everyone turned. 500 heads swiveled. Cameras pivoted. Natalie was walking toward the stage, pulling off her sunglasses, pulling off her cap, letting her auburn hair fall around her shoulders like a revelation. "You didn't watch me fall, Ethan. You pushed me." The crowd gasped. A collective intake of breath. Ethan froze, his face going pale, going white, going the color of death itself. Isabella's hand flew to her mouth. Security started moving toward Natalie, but she was already speaking, her voice carrying across the park with terrible clarity. "My name is Natalie Brooks. 6 years ago, my husband pushed me off a cliff while I was 6 months pregnant with his child. He wanted my life insurance money. He wanted to be with his mistress." She pointed at Isabella with an accusing finger. "That woman standing beside him. They planned my murder together." "This woman is disturbed," Ethan said into the microphone, his voice shaking, his composure crumbling in real time. "Security, please escort her." "Look at me, Ethan." Natalie had reached the base of the stage. "Really look at me." Their eyes met across the distance, and in that moment, Ethan saw it. He saw past the auburn hair, past the weight loss, past the 6 years of hardness and survival. He saw Natalie, his wife, his victim, his ghost made flesh. "No," he whispered, stumbling backward, his microphone picking up every word, broadcasting his horror to 500 witnesses. "No, no, no. You're dead. You're dead. I was supposed to be." Natalie's voice broke, emotion finally cracking through her controlled exterior. "You left me to die in that river. You left our baby to die in my womb. But we survived. And I've spent 6 years becoming strong enough to face you, to expose you, to make you pay for what you did." Isabella tried to run, but police officers, tipped off by Natalie earlier that day, given every piece of evidence she collected, were already moving through the crowd. "Mrs. Brooks," an officer said, approaching Isabella with calm professionalism, "we need you to come with us. We have some questions about the events of October 17th, 6 years ago." "This is insane," Isabella screamed, her perfect facade finally shattering completely. "She's lying. She's insane. She's..." But the park was silent except for camera shutters clicking, journalists frantically typing, the crowd watching as 2 people who'd built an empire on murder finally faced justice. Ethan sank to his knees on the stage, his head in his hands, his body trembling. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though whether he was talking to Natalie or to God or to his own conscience, no one knew. "I'm so sorry." Justice was served. Ethan and Isabella were convicted. The trial was a sensation, a spectacle. Justice on display for the world to see. But Natalie's story wasn't over. She still had one more person to face. One more truth to reveal. And this one would break her heart and heal it at the same time. Because 6 years ago, she didn't just survive. Someone else did too. The trial was a media sensation. Evidence of Ethan's affair with Isabella, his financial troubles before Natalie's death, the convenient life insurance payout, the rushed remarriage. It all came out under the harsh lights of public scrutiny. Margaret testified about finding Natalie by the river, broken and barely alive. Medical experts testified about her injuries, about how she'd survived against impossible odds, about the miracle of her baby's survival. And Natalie testified about the push, about the betrayal, about watching the man she loved become the man who tried to kill her, about rebuilding her life from nothing, from less than nothing. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Ethan Brooks, first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, attempted murder. Isabella Cruz, conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to murder, conspiracy to commit fraud. As the verdicts were read, as justice finally materialized in a courtroom, Natalie sat in the gallery, Margaret holding her hand. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel triumphant. She just felt exhausted. But there was one more thing she needed to do. One more reunion. One more truth. The Pattersons had been wonderful about everything. Once they learned the truth, that Sophia Morgan was actually Lucas's biological mother, that she'd been searching for him for years, that everything she'd done had been to find her son, they'd welcomed her with open arms. "He needs you," Mrs. Patterson had said, tears in her eyes, her voice full of compassion. "He's always needed you." Now Natalie stood in the Pattersons' living room, waiting as Lucas came down the stairs. He was holding his stuffed dinosaur, his eyes wide and confused, uncertain why Miss Sophia was here in his home. "Hey, sweetheart," Natalie said softly, kneeling to his level, making herself small and unthreatening. "Miss Sophia? What are you doing here?" Natalie took a deep breath. This was harder than facing Ethan. This was harder than surviving the fall. This was everything. "Lucas, I need to tell you something. Something really important." She glanced at the Pattersons, who nodded encouragingly. "Do you remember asking me why your real mom left you?" Lucas nodded, his little face serious, his eyes showing wisdom beyond his 6 years. "She didn't leave you because she wanted to. She left you because bad people hurt her, and she couldn't take care of you the way you deserved. But she never stopped looking for you. She never stopped loving you. Not for a single moment." "How do you know?" Natalie's eyes filled with tears. "Because I'm her sweetheart. I'm your mom." Lucas stared at her for a long moment. The room held its breath. "Then you're my mom? My real mom?" "Yes, baby. I'm your real mom. And I know this is confusing and scary. But—" Lucas dropped his dinosaur and threw his arms around Natalie's neck. "I knew it," he whispered against her shoulder. "I knew you were mine. You smelled like home." Natalie held her son. Finally held her son without pretense, without lies, and sobbed into his hair. 6 years of pain, loss, rage, and determination all poured out in that moment. 6 years of survival crystallized into this one perfect embrace. "I love you," she whispered. "I've loved you since before you were born. I will love you until the day I die and beyond that. Forever. I love you too, Mom." The word mom broke something in Natalie and healed something at the same time. It was an ending and a beginning, death and resurrection. 3 years later, Natalie stood in the backyard of her small house in Decatur, watching Lucas play with his friend from school. He was 9 now, happy and healing, no longer the quiet, withdrawn boy she'd first met at the foundation. He laughed freely now. He trusted easily. He was becoming whole. Margaret sat beside her on the porch, sipping sweet tea, her presence a constant comfort. "You did it, honey," Margaret said, her voice filled with pride. "You got justice. You got your boy back. You built something beautiful out of all that pain." Natalie smiled, but it was bittersweet. "Sometimes I still wake up and feel myself falling. Sometimes I still hear his voice saying, 'I'm sorry,' right before he pushed. That's okay. Trauma doesn't just disappear. It doesn't vanish because you got justice. No, but it transforms. It becomes something you carry instead of something that carries you." Lucas ran up to the porch, breathless and grinning, his face flushed with joy. "Mom, can we have pizza for dinner? We had pizza yesterday." "But Mom..." "Nice try, kiddo. How about I make your favorite chicken?" "Fine," he sighed dramatically, then ran back to his friends. Natalie watched him go, her heart full of a love so fierce it still sometimes overwhelmed her, threatened to drown her in the best possible way. She died in that river 6 years ago. The naive, trusting woman who believed in fairy tales had drowned in the dark water. But someone stronger had emerged from those dark waters, a woman who'd clawed her way back to life, who'd fought for justice, who'd reclaimed her son against impossible odds. She was Dr. Natalie Brooks now, PhD in trauma psychology, published author, advocate for domestic violence survivors, speaker at conferences, helper of the broken. And most importantly, Lucas's mom. Ethan was serving life without parole in a maximum security prison. Isabella would be eligible for parole in 15 years, but would likely never taste freedom again. Their empire was dust. Their legacy was ashes. And Natalie? She was building something new. Something real. Something beautiful. Not the fairy tale she'd once believed in, but something better. A life built on truth, on strength, on resilience, on the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. Mom. Lucas called from the yard. Watch this. Natalie watched as her son attempted a cartwheel, landing in a heap and laughing, completely unafraid of falling. Beautiful baby. She called back. Try again. And as the sun set over their small yard, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and purple, Natalie felt something she hadn't felt in 6 years. Peace. Not because the pain was gone. Not because the memories didn't haunt her. Not because the scars had disappeared. But because she'd survived. She'd fought back. She'd won. She'd reclaimed her life and her son. And in the end, that was enough. That was everything. Thank you so much for watching Natalie's incredible journey of survival, justice, and redemption. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful true crime-inspired stories. Drop a comment below telling us what you thought. Did justice prevail? Could you have survived what Natalie survived? We love hearing from you. Remember, if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out for help. You are not alone. Resources are available. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7. Until next time, stay strong, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the people we think we've destroyed come back stronger than ever. See you in the next story.